Hello, this is Sandy Lindsay. Today we're going to show you how to make a wire wrap donut pendant. It's going to be very similar to this one with the curls on each side and the ridge line, only instead of making the bail bare copper wire, we're going to be doing a woven bail, similar to this design. This design is very similar, only it has just the bail started here instead of starting on the end. This side was a little shorter, this side a little longer. And when we're going to use bare copper wire, for this project you're going to need a 18 gauge copper wire. And if you want to use something like a 16 gauge, you could do that. If you start getting to a 20 gauge, it might not be as rigid and you might have a little bit of problem with bending and be hard to keep the wire straight in this area here. And then we're going to use 28 gauge to do the weaving. If you use a 26 gauge, that would probably work just as well. I prefer 28 gauge for this because my weaves are easier to make that way. I think it makes the project go a little faster, even though you have to make more weaves in the length of time. I get my wire from riogrande.com and also from Copper Wire USA. So both of those pretty equivalent wire. I think I'm going to use this donut here to do my weave-in because I think that's going to look really good with the copper. The copper, as bright as it is not going to stay that color. Copper and this one here, I use liver of sulfur to oxidize, and the oxidation gives it the dark highlights. And it brings out, so you'll have lighter and darker, but all copper is going to, it's going to darken over time like a copper roof would. And so it's going to end up looking like this with the dark highlights and the brighter. And if you want to, you actually could, when you're finished, give it a polish up and brighten it up a little bit and bring out some of the highlights. If you do, it will eventually turn back looking similar to the way that it looked just a minute ago, over about a month's period to 2 months period. But all copper is going to do that eventually. Another good metal for this would be silver, and sterling silver or fine silver. And sterling silver is more rigid and would make better base wires. Fine silver would make the best wrapping wire because it's more flexible. Sterling tends to be stiffer and more brittle than fine silver. Fine silver being 99.9% silver and sterling being 92.5% silver with a lot of copper in it that makes it oxidize easier. But both of them will blacken with liver of sulfur. So I've chosen my donut, and I've chosen a 30mm donut that has about a 5mm width to it and has a little bit of a curve to its shape. It's not completely flat. The tools that I'm going to need include a round nose pliers to make the loops, a flush cutter to cut my wire. I like to use nylon jaw pliers to straighten my wire. Once I start working with 18 gauge wire, for me it's a little bit stiff to straighten with my fingers. And either straight or bent needle nose pliers or chain nose pliers. I prefer the kind that have the needle nose that have the flatter surface on the inside without the grooves and lines in it, and something with a fairly narrow point. Really doesn't matter if it's straight or if it's bent. So extra tools that are optional, I like to use files to file down my wire ends that are exposed so that the wire ends such as these right here in my coils, you can file them down or you can just tuck them up against the wire if you don't happen to have a file. And then you'll need several objects to make a coil around to start your bail so that you end up with a symmetrical bail. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by taking about 1 foot of wire, maybe slightly less, but close to a foot of wire because I want to have room for the bail to go up and for the bail and to wrap around and to have the donuts. So you probably need at least 10 inches of wire to make sure you're not selling yourself short. I like to use my nylon jaw pliers to straighten my copper. My copper is coming in coiled fashion, and I want to get those coils out of the wire. I usually just run this over it anywhere from like 5 to 10 times and just get the wire a little bit straight. Makes it easy for it to work with and makes it look better as a finished product in the end. You definitely want to straighten. You can straighten the parts that are bare metal before you do your weaving, but once you start weaving, the area that's got the weaving on it is going to straighten a little bit as you weave, but it's not going, anything that you want to hammer or straighten, you won't be able to do after it's been woven. Take my flush cutters and cut the wire. Doesn't really matter what end I put, but just to be aware that your flat side is going to give a straight cut and you're going to get a beveled cut where the beveled end of the flush cutters are. That's going to be important to know how your flush, so pay attention to how they cut now so that you'll know for when you're ready to do your finished product, your finished ends for your coils. Measuring these about straight with each other. And bring it down. Cut that. Now wire, make sure that you have something to protect your eyes when you're cutting your wire, or hold both ends. I've got the phone and my glasses in front of my eyes right now. So that way you'll protect your eyes from the wire. You don't want a piece of that to come up and snap you in the eye. Once you've got your two base wires,